So you spent your entire season on public land. What's your takeaway from this season? What'd you learn about yourself?
Oh my gosh. Perseverance, patience. Just because you do everything right doesn't mean that you end up with a punch tag. I think that's probably been the bottom line. I guess not to give the punchline away too quickly, but it's like I had literally, as far as encounters and sightings and opportunities, I had probably the best year I've ever had. I saw more mature bucks. And I'm counting like hunting private land in the past too. I have nothing against hunting private land. That's great. It's phenomenal. It's awesome. If you have access to it, by all means, cherish it and enjoy the ride. But I just don't have access to it. And you and I, like, we love the public land thing. We like the challenge. We like going, seeing new places, learning new properties. And I saw more mature bucks. I'm talking 4-year-olds or older and I'm not saying you can't shoot anything younger than that. It's like depending on the area you're hunting and your goals, whatever. But I saw some more mature bucks from a tree stand than I've ever seen in any season in my entire life. And I even had probably, I'd have to really sit and think about it, but close to more mature bucks actually in bow range than any other season in my entire life. And just the opportunities just didn't happen. I did have one solid opportunity that did not go the way that we as bow hunters, it's just a part of the nightmare that happens, and we can get into that. But for one reason or another, it just was the last chapter that couldn't close the book. It was just really, really difficult from that perspective.
That is something that is very, very common.
Yep.
It is so, that's why bow hunting is so different than gun hunting, because being a closer gun hunting is a totally different thing than being a closer bow hunting. It is just, that's when it gets real freaking hard, is when it's the moment of truth type of stuff. And, I'm glad you mentioned that you had a good season other than not killing the way you wanted to.
It's great.
Yeah. And you saw big bucks. And I'll tell you what, man, I'd probably have to go back and look a little bit and think about it, but I'm right there with you. As far as what I saw this season, what I encountered, every state I hunted only public land, I saw bucks that were at least 140 inches, up to deer that I put right at 160 on public, which is not, that takes me to see a deer of that caliber. It might take me 5, 7, 10 years of hunting.
Sure.
And I saw bucks over 150 in 2 states on public land this year. I didn't kill them. My buddy killed one of them. But just overall, the quality of hunting, not just quality of bucks, but the quality of hunting that I found this year and the quality of bucks was just not what people think of when they think of public land.
Yeah, I could agree 100%. And it was like, for me, and I know you're kind of the same way. It's about the experience and the hunt and how it transpires, the events that happen that really, that's the way I define a successful season or not. And it's because, it's hilarious, and who doesn't love seeing or, hopefully having an opportunity at some giant antler deer. Of course, like big racks are like part of like what drive us and like are this weird, like, kind of instinctual draw to it and everything like that. And then there's nothing wrong with a big rack, but like when you get a deer that gets to be 4 years old and even older on public land, it's like, that's really matching wits with something that just doesn't get up and move during daylight very much at all. And B is like, has seen it and been through it and experienced it. And like, that's the chess match that I love so much. And to figure those animals out and see where they live and how they navigate and move and the kind of sign they put down, like, and to see the amount of those type of deer, regardless of what's on their head or not, that's a trophy. And that's what I'm trying to do when I go out there, is to find the oldest deer I can and hunt that deer and then just have a heck of a great time doing it. And I agree with you. It's been that year. I've seen them. I know you saw them, and to have those experiences. It's the best. It was the best and I guess to drill into it a little bit more specifically, it was the best early season and pre-rut I can remember having in a very long time. To see buck activity, to see good kind of pre-rut activity, and then even like timely cold fronts in early October, to see the kind of movement that I saw on public was amazing.
Why? What was going on? Did you hunt more, or was it just the timing of the weather, or what?
I think it was a combination of both. I probably gave it a little bit more of a aggressive go early on than I normally did, which was a great lesson learned for me. I probably was a little more conservative, a little more sit back and wait. I still love hunting. I've always loved hunting October. I think the last 10 days to 15 days are phenomenal and a great time to kill a big one if you can get on one. But I actually probably saw as many or close to as many in the first 10 days of October that I did in the last 10. And I think it was a couple things. I think you're right. I think I said, why don't we try something a little different this year and just go after it, try some new things. So I was out there a little more. And B, I think it was good weather. We had timely cold fronts that, the first 4 days, we had some very unseasonably cool weather. And I think that really got them up and moving a little bit more. And that helped a ton. And there was some spots that actually I learned a little bit about. There's a really kind of big piece of chunk of public in Illinois that I hunt that's not too far from where I live. And I actually learned something really interesting about it was I had trouble accessing it later in the month and late October and early November because it was so open. Mm-hmm. Well, in early season, there's so much foliage, and I wasn't sure if the bucks would be using the area. Well, come to find out they were, and I could actually access and get even a little bit tighter to them because there was so much cover and foliage on. So taking that into the next season, into 2020 season, or even beyond, having that information at my fingertips now is going to be so much more beneficial because it's like, dude, don't wait. Like you can get in there and get tight to them if you get the right conditions. Just having that extra experience, that added experience, and taking some positives away from hunting that early season, that was an awesome learning experience for me.
Man, that lesson is a good one, and that's something. I'll hunt a field edge if it's right, but I'm a staging area guy a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And growing up in a state like Minnesota where our gun season opens so early in November, I don't rely on the rut here.
Yeah.
And so I've spent so much time hunting in the woods when they're fully leafed out and finding those staging areas and that thing you're talking about where getting in, not getting spotted, you can actually move a hell of a lot quieter a lot of times because the leaves aren't down. There's something to that. And that, to me anyway, a lot of times ties into my winter scouting, which we're going to get into here, in the next couple of months, is finding those staging areas and getting in there in September and the beginning of October. And you can do those things, and people think, well, that's not the best time to be out there, but it's silly. Those deer are out there moving, and we all know those big bucks move in the cover. They move where they feel secure. Well, that woods starts out at its most secure in September. And as it gets more open, it gets less secure to them. And they're probably, I think that ties into sort of the nocturnal thing and the less daylight movement because there's just fewer places they can go where they're going to feel safe.
Absolutely. And having those, and I think and we talked about, you and I talk about this a lot. And I know we talked about this, before we started Project Public and everything like that, but it was like having enough of those spots in your arsenal to be able to go to is incredibly important. And that's one of the things I really kind of bet on this year. What I did leading into this season to be prepared was in the past, I was always kind of like, all right, it's a public spot. I don't want to put too much, there's all this pressure going on. I know I've been able to, through postseason scouting, through kind of all this work, been able to find these little hot spots that I know are kind of untouched or get very little pressure around them. These little bubbles inside of these public properties. And it's like, I want to save that, right? It's, wait till it's right. Well, there's a lot to be said for that too. But I kind of took the mindset going into this fall with, go in there when the conditions are right, but have enough of them to where you don't have to wait. I can go to this property and hunt this bubble. I can go hunt this bubble to where it's like now I've lengthened my high odd areas for the entire season instead of just like, oh, it's the rut. I'm going to go hunt my best spots. And that's the end of it because it is public land. Anybody can find those spots. Anybody can have access to those spots, which is great. But, I think one of the cool things is it almost in a weird way takes pressure off because it's not like a piece of private property where it's all you're going to hunt. You're confined to what that property is and you're saving, or you're only hunting this one piece of public and you have to save this one or feel like you have to save. the more outreach you do in these new public areas you find, and you can just hunt down these spots at whatever times of the year, even though they're great spots, all of a sudden your odds of getting in front of a really good deer or a deer you want to shoot go up exponentially, because you're just broadening your choices. You're broadening your horizons on what you can hunt. And that was a mentality I took this year. And I think that's what I really contribute a lot of that, is just not necessarily waiting for those key spots, but just having more of them. Yep. Greatly increased my sightings. I think that was one of those things that I was able to find the deer more often because I had more spots available.
Yeah. You kept hunting. And that's,
yeah.
That is a lesson. This is maybe one of the hardest things to get people to understand is, you mentioned this, somebody has a 40 or an 80 or, the family 120 acre farm or whatever, and that's what they hunt. And the wind's wrong for it today, so they're not going to hunt. Or, can't access it this way, or the corn's still standing here, so I'm not going to hunt it. And it's like, well, if you have time to hunt, you should go hunt. And nobody wants to go hunt public if they have private. And it's because they don't give it the chance to see that it can be just as good.
Absolutely.
And, I talk about this a lot. I own 2 little properties over in Wisconsin where I hunt, and I have way better hunting on public land because I have way more land to work with and way more options. And so I have my one property, I love it. It's 30 acres. And I have a food plot in there, and I've put some time into it. It's like an okay food plot,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a tractor or anything.
Which
I don't
is fun. Yeah.
Like it's really good for a doe in October.
Right.
But bucks cruise through there sometimes, whatever. But I spend almost all my time hunting public land because I can go in and hang and hunt. And last year I hunted that property maybe twice, I think, 2 sits. And I killed one doe in there the first time I sat there. Never saw a buck. I ran a bunch of cameras in there. Never had a whole lot of good buck activity in there. And I go hunt this public land 10 miles down the road and see a 160, almost have him in my lap, and then kill a great buck on public, bigger than anything I've ever killed on that private land.
Yeah.
And I'm going, conventional wisdom says this is not how it works, bud, but this is how it works if you get out there like you're talking.
Yeah, creating opportunities and what's around you is what you have to do, and you clearly did that. I mean, heck, it's like, okay, public hunting's so hard, it's over, and definitely it is. It can get overpressured, but putting the time in to find the right spots and to be able to understand how deer are utilizing that property. I mean, heck, you didn't even make it to the rut this year because you filled all your tags. It's like, it can happen. I mean, that's a real thing that can happen. I mean, you capitalized on those opportunities, and it paid off, and it's just. Man, I just wish I wish more people would give it more of a chance, because they can see how really, how good it can really be. And you go into some of these states that you and I travel to, and I mean, it's like, there's nothing other than the hunting pressure. There's nothing that separates this incredible private property neighboring this public property. It's the same thing. The deer don't know any different, other than the human presence and pressure. But if you work hard and able to find, where the pressure isn't, and that doesn't mean it's always 2 miles back. Sometimes it's right off the road, whatever, just doing the homework and being, observant of where that pressure isn't. It's pretty amazing. I mean, what you can come up with.
Well, and I think, I used to think, I mean, I still do, I guess, that, the hunting pressure is the number one enemy of your success,
Right.
whether it's you putting it on them or somebody else. I think we greatly overestimate the amount of pressure on some of these places. I think, and I see this as a local bias a lot of times. People who live close to some public chunk, they see, drive by and they see a truck in the parking lot every night. And it's just like, well, that's not worth hunting. That's not worth hunting. When you and I go and we travel, you show up, you have no history there. And so it's like, I don't know how many trucks have been in this parking lot day in and day out. And you show up and you just go hunt, because that's just a given. Like there might have been pressure, there might not have been pressure. There's some level. When you show up, it doesn't matter. And if you kind of can get past that local bias or the bias against public land and go give it a shot, what you'll find is you're actually hunting, and you like that, because you have to figure stuff out on the fly. And you'll find that if you put the work in, your opportunities will be there in a lot of places. I know there's people listening like, oh yeah, come try that where I live, or come try. And like, man, people reach out to us from Louisiana and New York and all over the place. And they're like, they're killing big bucks and having awesome hunts. And yeah, it's not easy in a lot of places, but that's okay. Like I think we've really, really made a mistake in the hunting community where we've presented easy as good. And you see this with this is what I wanted to talk to you about. We'll get into the TV show thing here in a second, but you see this all the time where it's like, okay, well, I got my food plot, I got my redneck blind, I've got this awesome little mecca set up, and all I got to do is show up on Halloween and kill my buck, or show up on November 7th. And hey, go ahead. But for most of us, that level of easy isn't going to exist. We're not going to have that. And to aspire to that, some people, sure. A lot of people don't really. That's like a careful what you wish for thing, because a lot of people don't actually want that. They think they do because it'll be easy to kill a big buck, but really what they want is just a chance.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, and kind of following that same thread of what you're talking about with the experience and the hard work. It's so interesting. I killed, like, for last year, I killed 2 bucks in 4 sits last year. Like, it was just one of those years, right? Where everything was lining up right. You get the deer comes in within range, you shoot him, it's good. This year, it's like I'm almost more fired up going into this postseason and preparing for 2020 than I was coming off a very successful season last year, coming into this season, because it was so much hard work, but I experienced so much. I learned so much. And it was like, I'm like more amped to like really get in and figure them out. And now it's like, oh my gosh, I had so much more time in the woods to prepare for this fall, to prepare for next fall, that it's just like, now it's like, all right, we're really getting something figured out now, because it forced me to hunt. Like, even though things, quote unquote, I wasn't successful, like, by filling a bunch of tags, or things weren't necessarily going my way, it gave me an opportunity to try new things and do more and hunt more than I would have originally. And that's what you're learning. I mean, that you're learning from being out there, not learning from, filling a tag necessarily all the time.